Hey guys, ever seen this picture? You got t-shirts about it. It's kind of cool. Little 23 foot. Pretty nice. Guy made this for me. It says JG on it. Isn't that cute? Anyway, hi. Jim Bounds with Colt Motorworks and Motorhome Rehab Ranch on Patreon. And we did a video recently about how good the Oldsmobile engines are geared and set for a GMC Motorhome. I had a question about how do I tell if my motor's any good? Good question. So let me give you a little quick 101 on that. And yeah, let the L out. She's finished her yeah, there you go. Go on out. She's big. She don't want to fit out the door. So how do you know if your motor is any good? All right. Well, the first thing is fire it up. Does it leak? Does it blow smoke? Well, that's half the battle. Okay. So the next thing you do, sit in the seat, watch your oil pressure. Oil pressure goes up to some point. Our gauges are what called idiot gauges. It doesn't have any numbers on it, you know. My son borrowed my motorhome to go to FAA school in Oklahoma City, and one day he called me and he said, "What kind of oil pressure should it be? Where should the needle be?" And I told him and all this stuff. When I got the motorhome back, he had put gauges on. I mean, he'd taken a Sharpie and written on the front of the gauges where it should be. That's so smart. Yeah, airplane, you know how they do that. But on the oil pressure, wherever it goes up to, call it X. Okay. As it warms up, it's going to scare you if you watch it because the oil pressure is going to drop. You go, oh, it will drop. When the motor gets hot, it will drop to half of what it was when it was cold. Okay? That's okay. That's fine. Now, if it's got decent oil pressure and then when it's hot, it's like 0, that means that the engine is loose. That means the bearings are loose. You need to look at the oil pressure when it's hot. Okay? So if you get X oil pressure cold, 1/2 X hot, and then when you rev it, it comes up a little bit, good to go. Now as the oil pressure is going down, your water temperature is coming up. Now if you've got an original sender, an original idiot gauge, it'll go to the first hash mark and it'll sit there like it's super glued. If it does that, your cooling system is great. Now, if it's sitting there and it goes up a little bit and then you start driving and it comes back down, it sits there a little while and it comes back up to maybe half, you may want to put a calibrated gauge on that and see what it's doing, because the cooling system, we had talked before about how big the water jackets and the block and all this stuff are. This thing will stay cold and cool all the time, no matter if you're going 120 miles an hour or sitting at idle, doesn't matter. It will stay at 1/4. If it goes up and down, you may have a fan clutch out, or one of the components in the cooling system may be an issue. Okay. Also, as it warms up, you want to listen to it. It's got weird noises. Okay. Another one, after it's warm. Again, all of these things, you wait until after it's warm because that's where the engine is supposed to run, right? When it's cold, that's one thing. Now, when it's warm, look at your vacuum. Put a vacuum gauge on the engine. You should have 18 inches or somewhere around 18 inches of vacuum, cold or hot, doesn't matter. Vacuum should not change with temperature. If you have 18 inches of vacuum cold and maybe you have 14 hot, you've got a vacuum leak. Chances are it's going to be the intake manifold will crack. It's no big deal. You block them off. This is a common problem with these engines. So watch your vacuum. Your vacuum should always stay around 18 inches. All right, while you're watching the vacuum, rev the gas one time. You'll watch the vacuum go down and come up. Come back to 18. If it goes down, comes back to 18, it goes maybe to 20 or 22, and it comes back to 18, and it's going back and forth like this, and the engine's just sitting there running normal, that's a loose timing chain. Okay? When you put a timing chain in, you put a double roller chain in it, so it's stronger, because remember we told you that the valve system has more friction in it. It will stretch the timing chain. At 60 or 70,000 miles, an original timing chain will stretch. If you have an original motor and it's been untouched, just go buy a timing chain and a gasket set and put it in, because I'll guarantee you it's bad, it's loose, and that's the best thing you can do for performance, okay? So watch that. Your vacuum can tell you a lot. I love a vacuum gauge on the dash because you can see your performance. You can see, if you can stay above 10 inches of vacuum on the highway doing 60 miles an hour, you're going to save gas. The higher that needle, the less gas you're using. The lower the needle, the more you have your foot in it, and the more gas is going to go in there. So remember that. Say if you've got a family member that maybe is a lead foot and it costs them $10 to go to the grocery store, put a vacuum gauge in the car and say, just keep the vacuum as high as you can and you'll save gas. And I'm telling you, it'll work. On the road on a GMC, the vacuum will tell you many, many things. Okay? So oil pressure, water temperature, vacuum, very important. Okay? Another thing you can do, on the driver's side valve cover, there's an air breather where the crankcase breathes. Pull that off the valve cover and take a piece of paper and lay there. It should just kind of flop a little. If it sucks it in or it blows it out, you've got issues between your cylinders and your crankcase. The crankcase should not have pressure in it and should not have vacuum in it. And you can tell that by putting a piece of paper there. All right? So, and basically just now drive it. Just go drive it. How does it feel? Does it feel sluggish? Does it feel... The more you tax a motor, the more it needs to be in tune. Yeah, you know, you've got a lawnmower, as long as it'll mow the grass, you don't really care. But when you're really taxing a motorhome, the timing to set the thing up to proper carburation, all this stuff makes a big difference on the engine. So if it's not running right, and you drive it and it just feels real sluggish, you may need to check your timing, maybe tune it, maybe bad spark plugs. Listen, plug wires go bad. How does a wire go bad? It's actually a plug wire is not a wire. It's a piece of fiberglass ribbon with carbon sprayed on it. Why do they do that? So your radio have a lot of noise. Okay? Spark plugs have RF. And the carbon on there stops that. Well, the carbon starts to separate and it'll start arcing. Right? When you replace spark plugs, you should replace plug wires. I would do cap and rotor too. Everything in the high voltage circuit, you should replace it. You could have a 30-year-old distributor button. I mean, my goodness. You know, all these things, you've got to look at it as a holistic view, okay, when you're going to tune it. What we're talking about here is the basic engine. We need to know that it will cool. We got to know that it's got oil. We got to know that all the parts are moving right. All right? And if they are, run the motor. If it's got a loose timing chain, change it. Don't run it and run it and run it. Like mine's right now loose. I'm not going to drive it because if it jumps timing, I'm done. I got to stop. So keep the motor up. If you notice something wrong with it, get it going. Do something with it. If you do have low oil pressure or you do have a knocking sound in it, that's a great engine to rebuild. That's a great core because it's not had any trauma. It hasn't locked up. It hasn't overheated. That's what you want to have to rebuild. Something that engine, that block, those heads, those main component pieces have done their job and they can be rebuilt and renewed and the thing will run just as good as possible. You've got to keep up with it. Don't say, well, it's been knocking forever, we'll let it go. Now, dude, I know it's expensive. Hey, who said this thing was going to be cheap? I mean, come on. All right, well, look, if you have any other questions about your motor, if you do have to get it rebuilt, I tell you, find a builder near you, find somebody, and I'd be happy to talk to them. Got to remember this. Mechanics have three things going for themselves. They got their tools, they got their knowledge, and they got their tattoos. You don't want to mess with any of them, okay? Tell your machinist and your builder, I'm not going to tell them how to do things. I'm going to tell them how we've done it for 25 years, and they can do what they want. I'm happy to help you build your motor. That's Motorhome Rehab Ranch, and that's why you're a ranch hand, okay? So, anything about motors, let me know. Next time, we'll talk about something else. See ya.